Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If there's one session that's important for India at 100 to reach where it should be, which what the Prime Minister said was Vikasit Bharat, or a developed country, it's technology. And in the last couple of years, we've seen quite a dramatic shift in the way the government approaches technology. For many years, it was in the domain of the public sector or government. And the three crown jewels that was there, and Dr. Atul Rane represents one of them, DRDO, atomic energy and space, was heavily dominated by government, though private sector had come in. Sometime in the midst of COVID, Nirmala Sitharaman, the finance minister, came out with reforms, particularly in space and atomic energy, and subsequently in this budget, as well at that time in defense, where these sectors were opened out. Now, for space, for instance, ISRO, Indian Space Research Organization, outstanding public institution, is now opened up in the sense that startups and others can launch their own vehicles, they can use the ISRO facilities, build rockets as well as satellites. And in defense, the private sector has been encouraged through a policy where you have put a certain number of lists that can only be made in India. And we've seen in atomic energy, one of the toughest commissions and in terms of departments where we've never allowed anybody to come in. Private sector is allowed to come in terms of building reactors as well as in medicinal purposes. So this is quite a reformatory process that has happened. And today we have a very interesting panel to look ahead and see what can be done in the next 25 years at this very, very critical sector. I'm delighted to introduce the most experienced. We have a great blend of experience and youth in this. Dr. Atul Rane, who's Chief Executive and Managing Director of BrahMos Aerospace. In fact, to their credit, they've built BrahMos in collaboration with Russia, and it is now considered to be the world's fastest supersonic cruise missile. It goes at speeds of Mach 2 to 3, if I'm right, and a distance about 300 meters, gives Indian armed forces a real punch. Whether knocking submarines down, ships, anything, you name it. Now they've got land, air, as well as, of course, they started with sea at this thing. So delighted to welcome you on this. Next to him is Anirudh Sharma, Digantara Research. His startup was created in the dormitory of lovely university in Jalandhar. And today, he's developed one of the first in-orbit space debris monitoring and tracking system, apart from looking at low Earth orbit satellites. I'm quickly going through this so that we have time to talk. Ankit Mehta, co-founder of and CEO of IdeaForge Technology. He calls himself the next generation drone manufacturer, drone company, and has advanced unmanned aerial vehicles that's there, and probably one of the largest in the country that's doing that. So welcome, Ankit. And of course, Vikram Singh Meena, who's probably competing with him, also a drone specialist, but looks at different kinds of things in terms of logic and everything else. So we have a fabulous panel, as I said, with a great blend of tremendous amount of experience that has dealt with the public sector and government institutions and a lot of startups that have come up. So let me start with Atul Rane. You have now, you've been with the DRDO for a long time. You've actually worked with Dr. Kalam on guided missiles, then branched off, become BrahMos. What would you say would be the 4 or 5 things that you think, as we head to 100 or next decade, in your experience, that we need to change or push towards making sure R&D becomes tops in the country?
Thank you, Raj. Thanks for the interesting introduction. I've not been talked about in that manner for a long time. 4 or 5 things. I have maybe a bigger list also. The policies are in place, as you have said. Maybe few more policies, which we will look at as we go through the discussions. Streamlining all the policies which are there. The education policy is another thing which we need to really look at. There's some areas there which we can look at. The industry is one thing which I would say needs to get their own R&D. It's not that DRDO or R&D institutions should be working with them alone. That synergy anyway is required. But I would say that the industry should have their own R&D force. After all, any of the so-called developed nations have their private industries who do the R&D, but not we don't have it yet. Yes, Tata's and Baba Kalyani Group have gone ahead and done the A tags, but it's just a flash in the pan. We need to do this more with them.
Very good point.
The youngsters here have started it off. So the next one would be incubation of the startups and the getting them up. They've already got up. These guys have got up without the policies, actually speaking, and they've bucked the chain. But now we need to create policies so we get more of them, more of these type of people. We also need to look at how we can synergize not just industry, R&D and academia, but the society in total also.
Now, coming to BrahMos itself, how much of BrahMos is privatized? And, over the years, have you involved private sector industry, and what has been your experience in dealing with it?
I like to say this, I may be wrong in saying it, but BrahMos started what was known as the military industrial complex as a first in the country. We were truly Atmanirbhar Bharat even before these words were coined. We have a huge backup. I call them industry partners because we ourselves are a private limited company. We have about 6 major industries with us, one or two PSUs. We have about 200 SMEs and MSMEs with us. They create the supply chain. And of course, we have our production partners across the seas also. The whole thing is done through, the supply chain is totally through private industries, let me put it that way, with the exception of 1 or 2 PSUs.
But tomorrow, can a private sector industry actually build the BrahMos and do it itself? Does it need a government entity to do it?
Only for the permissions. It's possible.
Okay. But otherwise, there is technology available right now in the country.
Absolutely, absolutely. May not be a BrahMos, maybe something close to a BrahMos.
Before I request the next speaker to make his points, I have to ask this question because it's bang in the news. It is about the fact that one of your missiles misfired, went into Pakistan, and created almost an international scare, including in Pakistan, which still doesn't accept it. Who was to blame? Was any of your, we read in the papers that 3 Air Force officers had to go because of this. Was it the fault of, did any of your officers have to go, or what is the inside of this?
Out of syllabus question. But anyway, a court of inquiry was held. SOPs were not followed. Let me put it, proper SOPs are in place. SOPs were not followed. Maybe it was riding a bicycle without hands. Let me put it that way.
Riding a bicycle without hands, okay. But none of you all, in the sense, you have now exporting to Philippines. Did this have a problem? Because people must have been concerned. So are you saying that from BrahMos' side, from the company's side, there was no issue with the missile? It's not like this was a malfunctioned missile that went?
No, absolutely not. In fact, that is one thing which our customers abroad, potential ones as well as the current ones, they are very clear, and even our users are very clear that there was no technical malfunction at all.
And you did a thorough review of this to check?
Absolutely. It's been going on over the last 2-3 months.
And finally, I'm not going to dominate this out of syllabus question. What are the checks and balances does the BrahMos ensure that it should not do what it did at that time?
No, there are these standard locks, standard procedures which are there. And over and above whatever software and hardware locks we have put in, the SOPs created by the users, that also is there. So there's not much change required.
So it's really the user that has misused this in some senses?
I leave that for interpretation of someone else.
Okay. I won't push you on this thing, on another forum maybe. But let's come to Anirudh Sharma. Now, we've seen space being a very close-knit sort of group. You've broken through. There are a lot of other startups like it. What has your experience been, and what would be 2 or 3 things that you would say in this particular domain that if we have to become world players, we have joined the big boys, but for private industry and others, what is the big push you think is required?
So I would say, 3 important things. The first thing is policy, which already has, a lot of changes right now, and we've seen government doing a tremendous change in the policy making as well, and we'll have the space policy coming out in some time. Even before that, there has to be an entity that is, that can guide startups. So basically towards how they can launch and build satellites, because this was more of a state-run thing before, right? So now is the time when things are changing and startups have to build satellites. Now it's not just ISRO's supply chain, it's more than that. So startups are starting to build a full stack development where they build satellites, they launch satellites, and also build sometimes launch vehicles as well. For such things, there has to be a hand-in-hand support from the government as well. And the last thing I would say is, for such companies to grow, even before the private equity or venture capital comes in, it has to be the government support to develop indigenous capabilities, which we've seen already. And in our case, at least since the time that we started in 2019, we've been able to launch one satellite, and we were one of the first companies to get authorization from InSpace. We launched the satellite on PSLV C-53. It was a payload that we launched on PSLV C-53 on June 30th. So this was the kind of support that startups require. This will, propel innovations as well. So this will be the things that I would think is important for startups to grow.
Now, Anirudh, your experience with ISRO, because after all, IncoSpace is there and there are various institutions. Are they still the big brother, or now they're very open about allowing their laboratories and their facilities to be used? Do you have to knock a lot of doors, or it's much easier now?
So I would say the kind of support that we got, just to set the ground here, in fact, in our case as well, when we launched our first satellite, we built and launched this in under 4 months. So the sensor that we built, and we had to integrate it, test it, and then launch it. It happened under 4 months. If not for ISRO, ISRO supported us a lot till the end stage, till the time we launched. If not such a support, we wouldn't have done that in such short span, I would say. And this helped us to build credibility in the market faster, right? So for space companies, there is already a large horizon of time to build and mature technologies. If such things happen, this will hasten innovations. And this has happened with us, so this is actually a remarkable example that I can give you how ISRO has changed right now. And they're pretty much open in supporting startups, and they're doing that. I think they'll do it in near future as well. We've seen 2 companies launching, and we've also set up our first observatory for space situational awareness.
That's wonderful. Let's get to Ankit Mehta. And does he have a similar story? Because drones, the policy, I think Jyotiraditya Scindia was there in the morning, talked of the fact that it's a much more open policy. He's actually made space for drones to operate within the airspace. Now, because this was in some senses a virgin technology, it was there around for a long time, but for India to develop it and do it, how much of this are you relying on, say, collaborations internationally, or have you developed the drones yourself and the kind of development that you've done? And what are those lessons that you can derive from that in a general way so that the rest of us can follow?
So, we started actually building quadcopter drones, the ones that you now commonly see in all the weddings, since 2004. It was actually a desire to build an innovative helicopter that made us come up with the configuration independently and build it. So for us, I think it was always about building something innovative. We fell in love with wanting to build something that will fly, but is innovative, and something that we can do and build on our own. And I think, in a way, the journey has been all about building at a time where there was no open source technology available in this space. There was absolutely no tools available to just pick up off the shelf. In fact, the first drone we built did not even have what is usually required, which is counter-rotating propellers. We did not even have those available off the shelf. So in a way, we had to actually develop everything from grounds up, make sure that we know very, very deeply where is it required to innovate, to push the boundaries of what's possible. Thankfully, the kind of exposure we received at IIT Bombay as a founding team, we were able to very quickly realize that it's no value in being best only in India, particularly because we had won a competition hands down in our country. But when we went to participate globally, we realized that some of our ideas were also short of where the imagination already was. And I think some of these exposures, these quick insights that you get when you get exposed more, help you realize that there is very little merit in doing what's best in India. And I think that's a good segue into my lessons and learnings here, is that I think we'll do very little if we just try to match what's possible globally. BrahMos is a great example. It is the fastest missile in the world. And that's what we need to do. We need to build tech that put us out there, that makes sure that we are able to put a stake in the ground and claim the best in the world, and not just best in India or just made in India. And I think for us to accelerate towards innovation, we have to take those bold steps. We feel a lot of pride when we compete with some of the incumbents in this space and are still able to deliver technology which is more contextual to our environment, our needs. And therefore, when we build for our needs, particularly given the diverse geography of the country, we are able to build something which is more meaningful, better performing, because our conditions are actually some of the harshest in the world, particularly where we operate some of these tools. So that is one area. The other area I feel is very important is that we are very less collaborative. As a country, I think, and as companies, as even individuals, we don't like working together as much between organizations. And I feel that it's a shame because, the tallest trees, the redwood trees in the world, grow the tallest because, not just because their roots are deep, but because they are all so well intermeshed together that they are able to, and you look at all the large corporations in the world, they are all cross-leveraging pretty much everything. And they are all giants that we believe will be unlikely to be shaken from their pedestal. So I think collaborative work is, I think, going to be very important going forward. And I feel that in our academic setup, so our industry, I also agree, is not very pro-investing in development, particularly because a lot of them probably don't have the technical background that is essential for it to be pro-development, and very risk-averse as well, given the low margins and the focus on the bottom of the pyramid in many cases in our country. So I feel that at the academic level, we cannot stop at doing technology at the technology readiness level of 4 or 5. Some technology examples from academia have to go all the way up to technology readiness level 8 and 9. And I think when we do that, we will be able to accelerate a lot of this journey.
I'll come back to you on this. And rather than the redwood trees, let's say we are too many individual Shanai players and you really need an orchestra to come.
Absolutely. That's a great example.
Let's come to Vikram Singh, Meena. And you've also dealt with the thing, and now you're using a lot of practical uses for your drones. 2 or 3 things where you see things need to be made differently, where we can progress, as Ankit was saying. He had a lot of points. What more would you add to that?
Definitely, on certain points, I agree with other panelists as well. As a India, and when we are saying India at 100, we need to transform, right? We need to unlearn the old ways and learn the new ways, basically, to even think and take bigger risks, not just from the startups and not from the employees and the people from the government, from the academia, from the R&D institutes and everyone. So that appetite of taking risk. And then, so if let's say we need to go even from point A to point B on a Google map, we need to know where we are and where we need to go, right? So we need to define it, India at 100, where we need to be. Now, India needs to move out of this particular framework of the service-oriented mindset. Why Ankit or why maybe some of us as a startups are able to have in-house R&D and development which leads to indigenization of the products? Because maybe institutes like IIT Kanpur, IIT Bombay and other institutes are actually giving certain kind of a platform. Though still there is a lot of gap between academia, R&D institutes and the industry. And this particular collaboration, as Ankit was saying, definitely needed. And West versus India, this is the, I think, big difference that we have. We do not believe in collaboration. Somehow we want to always be in silos. And then we are not open to changes also. So this is one. Then when we talk about the education also, so education is important, skill is also important, but what will work in real life is more important, right? That needs to be taught during from early days as well as in the graduation time and post-graduation time as well. That will be bridged when the collaboration between all these entities will flourish. Now that can be done by right policies which are coming nowadays in the new regime. And along with the policy, there needs to be the supportive, as I think Anirudh was mentioning about the the first step of the funding should be from the government. It can be a grant, it can be some different kind of a modality. That funding will give a lot of confidence to the R&D people, right? I mean, the startups in initial days. And in India, we always think that what is the ROI, right? Immediately, we cannot think of ROI. If we are thinking of ROI at day one, we can't actually change even after 25 years from here. So if we need to change after 25 years from here, we need to invest now and then see the fruits at the India at 100, basically.
Well, that's a good point to take off and look at education, which you also mentioned, and we've got only about 5 minutes, so we'll do a quick round, and the answers need to be much shorter. But do you think, when you look at the structure that is in the US, where you talk to this military-industrial complex, a lot of that you could also add a university complex over there. How much of Indian education system needs to change, where research and development is happening at the university level rather than at department level and institutional levels like this?
No, actually, it's already started. Let me tell you that we would like to say it should start. It started. We have these centers of excellence. We have these technology parks which have come up. STEM is already become part and parcel of Indian education. I mean, all of us have come through that. Maybe a little less earlier, but today it's become actually something. The technology parks are going to nurture the mind processes of the students. There's no doubt about that. In fact, just yesterday I was in one of the institutes in Mumbai, and the type of questions which are coming out from the students, I mean, they're way ahead of what I was at that age. So things have started. It's only that we need to now channelize these things. On one of the points which they were saying is that looking for, these three guys have managed without funds from the government. I mean, that's really wonderful. But at least the policies are out there that now the people can get a faster start. So these guys have to zoom a little further. Main thing is that our policies are in place. We just need to streamline them. And education, the universities are already in. The IITs, the NITs, and all the big universities have already got centers of excellence, either from the government, either from S&T, either from MOD, DRDO. Even the industries have started a lot of tie-ups. DST has started a lot of things. So the academia is in. It's only a matter of channelizing that. The only danger which I see among the universities, I'm sorry, we are time bound, is that our universities should not get hijacked by the foreign hands. Because the funding which may be being given for these incubation centers may not be equivalent to what the American universities or the Western universities are getting.
Excellent
that is
point.
Something which we may need to look at very carefully, and how to hold it back in that.
Which actually comes to the gross expenditure on R&D, which is India is among the lowest spenders when it comes to R&D. And you could talk about that, Anirudh, in terms of the fact that you set up a startup, and what was the difficulty you had, and what is the kind of response you're getting from private industry or investors to come in and invest in your company?
So first of all, I would agree with the points that he said, which is India is changing in terms of the university level research. So if not the research that we did in the university, we wouldn't have had a company today. So we built everything, even the patents that we have granted, we built it during our university days. That is one validation that you can give for investors. And the second thing in deep tech, like I said in the previous discussion, is that it has the time to mature a technology is much longer than any other sectors. And investors' interest, I mean, they have to be very patient enough to wait for the returns here. It's not like a SaaS company or a consumer internet company. It's totally different scenario here. So I would say that the R&D, the R&D activity in India, in fact, even in terms of funds, I would say that we received a lot of grants from the government initially, even before the investors came in. That helped us, to build some sort of a prototype for us to be able to demonstrate that this is the credibility that we can bring onto the market if this product is out. So with that, support that we got from the government, we got investment from the private equity firms. So this is a great example to start with. And there are a lot of schemes that have come up right now, both from the central ministry and state, where they're encouraging deep tech startups to build technology in India. And there are a lot of incentives that you get as a startup even to have an IP or a patent.
Coming to you, Ankit, you have been in business now for close to 2 decades. what is the opportunity you see to take what you've done abroad? What is the kind of level, say, to compete with China and others, so that you could become a global player, not just in India selling what you're doing?
No, we've actually just started looking outside our country. We are trying to go to other countries, and we've started to ship as well some of our systems. So we do believe that all those years of hard work is something that will pay off. What is important is to build something differentiated. You have to stand apart from the crowd when you go out there, and I think India very uniquely, like I mentioned, gives you that opportunity to build in a very tough environment, both from capital, from business, from environmental perspective as well. So we hope that we are at a reasonable pedestal now to.
Are you getting any incentives like the PLI companies are getting? Anything that you want so that you could shoot to be a global player?
Yeah, so we are one of the shortlisted beneficiaries of the PLI scheme, as well as, what Anirudh mentioned, we've been actually a good beneficiary of a lot of government grants in the initial part of our journey. So I think government has played a great role. The institute that we were a part of played a great role in making sure that our passion stays alive, and we are able to continue to build brick by brick and come up to here at least.
And coming, Vikram, quickly in terms of when you look at the kind of industries that you're servicing, what is the response you're getting? Because you're looking across healthcare. Are people responsive to the kind of drone technology that you're offering? Are they willing to change? Is that something that you have to change the mindsets in the country?
So within the drone segment also, what we are building is little futuristic from the customer's point of view. What we are building is for drone-based logistics, delivering of healthcare items and medicines, parcels, etc., etc. And we have been working with multiple state and central government agencies as well as the private players. So the receivingness of these technologies are very welcoming, though we have to basically prove on ground, because India as a price sensitive market is there, right? So you have to build best, deliver best, but at a cheapest price available, right? And that's what the real innovation is, what these startups and companies have to do. And that's what we are able to do. And we are already delivering these products with the different state governments for empowering the healthcare basically, and then building resilient healthcare and logistics ecosystem for next decades to come.
Okay, we've got about a minute and 20 seconds. So I'm going to make a wish list. Each one of you all, just one big thing that you would wish for to change for us to get, India at 100. What would make the difference? One thing from you, Atul.
Education. Okay. STEM education at all levels, with universities participating at school levels also.
I would say government handholding and transparent policy framework.
And?
The mindset to back really bold ideas.
Start celebrating the failures. That is the kind of mindset we need to bring in, basically.
And I'm going to give you the last word, Atul. 30 seconds. Firstly, let's give a very warm round of applause. BrahMos, our pride of India. What would we say the thing that you learned from BrahMos?
India is not behind. We are right there, step to step, shoulder to shoulder with the world. And we are just on the pedestal of going out into the world. And all these guys are going to help us out in exporting more and more.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's give them a very warm round of applause for this. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share and subscribe.